With Taiwan's ruling Democratic Progressive Party, DPP, underperforming in the 9-in-1 local elections on November 25th, President Tsai Ing-wen resigned as party chair. As the party chair also in most cases becomes the presidential candidate, we will take a deeper dive at who could likely be nominated the next DPP presidential candidates in 2024, the challenges that lies ahead for the next president, and what implications they may have on Taiwan-U.S China relations. Hello and welcome to Taiwan Talks, covering the latest global news and analysis from a Taiwan perspective. I am Catherine Lu.
I'm Rath Wang. Joining us in the studio today is Lai I-chung, president of the Prospect Foundation, former Taiwanese diplomat in both Japan and the United States. President Lai is an expert in Taiwan-U.S China-Japan relations, and Yen Chen-shen, National Chengchi University professor of political science, who is also an expert in cross-strait and Taiwan-U.S China relations. A warm welcome back to both of you on the show today. I also spoke earlier to William Stanton, former de facto U.S. ambassador to Taiwan in his capacity as the director of the American Institute in Taiwan, AIT, and currently chair professor at the International College of Innovation at National Chengchi University. And we also hear from Lu Yeh-chung, National Chengchi University, Department of Diplomacy chair and professor. Let's start today's discussion first on which candidates are likely seen by analysts to become the next DPP presidential candidate. My first question goes to you, President Lai. President Tsai resigned as the party chairman in the aftermath of the 9-in-1 local elections, and Vice President Lai I-chung, or William Lai, announced his candidacy for the party chairmanship, with rivals that have been long time seen as potential candidates, such as Mayor of Taoyuan, Zheng Wen-chan, throwing in his support for Lai. How do you think Lai will fare in terms of uniting the party and bringing the DPP together for the 2024 elections?
I think, first of all, right now it doesn't seem to be there any strong candidate within DPP will come out to challenge Vice President Lai about his running for the DPP chairmanship. So there should be no doubt that Vice President Lai will be able to be the new DPP chairman.
And he's been preparing for this position for a long time. Do you think so?
I think he's preparing for becoming the next president of Taiwan for a long time.
Yeah, but party chair means something.
Party chair, but the DPP party chair, one of the major functions is to, especially this year, is to organize the DPP, the whole set of the candidates for LY and also for the presidential elections. And sometimes that if the chairman and the candidate, they are the same person, then basically the whole issue about whether we should have the primary, that will become controversial because if there are other people within DP who would like to challenge for the candidate primary, so that with William Lai in a position, in my view, to become the DPP chairman this year, then if there are other people who announce their candidacy to run for to force a primary, that will be a very interesting issue. But right now I do not think that anyone within DPP would like to announce such a candidacy to challenge William Lai when he becomes the chairman of the DPP for the position of becoming the DPP president candidate.
How are the party supporters looking at this? Not in terms of leadership or other factions, but in terms of DPP voters. Do you feel this is a positive move and that the DPP could do well in the legislative elections?
I think it goes on to two issues. The first one is that the DPP in this election did not run well. So that is why the President Tsai decided to resign from the DPP chairmanship to take the responsibility for this performance. And the whole process above it should be the examinations and the review of why DPP lost and how DPP should have a reform within itself to get momentum back for the year 2024 presidential as well as the LY elections. And the next question is that the William Lai right now to be in a position to become the DPP chairman, how he is going to first, to unite the whole DPP, especially among different factions. And second, will he be able to convince everyone within the DPP that he is the most likely and the strongest candidate for the DPP in the year 2024 presidential elections? I think the last questions probably will be less of the concern than the first one. That is the William Lai, his capability to unite the whole DPP.
But are the wounds actually healed from the 2019 primary where William Lai, the current vice president, fought very hard, fiercely with the current president, Tsai Ing-wen?
Yeah, so that's exactly the issue, because some people within the DPP, they still harbor the very ill feeling toward William Lai, believing he is the one that almost cost the DPP the whole election in year 2020 by forcing the primary. But some people actually argue that it is precisely due to the primary that the DPP in year 2020 was able to come out stronger than the year 2019. So it really is still an issue that is debatable. But I think it basically boils down to the people, their own perception regarding what the William Lai's role in year 2019 when he challenged the President Tsai for the DPP presidential candidates, as well as his performance as a vice president after year 2020, when he basically has been very silent and throw his full support behind the President Tsai for all the things. So I think it's a mixture of those two, how people will judge about the William Lai and within the DPP.
I see. Professor Yen, as a political star or a figure, I think William Lai is no stranger to us. It's because of that we know that he will take a stronger position on Taiwan's independence. Right now, U.S. China Taiwan relations is in a very delicate relationship right now. Do you think that will affect how U.S. trusting us?
I think he can take a cue from President Tsai before. When President Tsai was running in 2012, she was very much in a position about advocating for Taiwan independence, but that's not well received in the U.S. So the next time around in 2016, before the election, she went to the U.S. and she changed her position, saying she will maintain the status quo.
Yeah.
And that, I think, earned the trust of the U.S. So somehow there was, I would not say U.S. will fully support her, but at least U.S. is not against her candidacy in 2016. So the problem right now with William Lai is he is the vice president right now. And officially, he cannot travel to the U.S., not like President Tsai in 2015 before the election.
So lack of communication, a mutual understanding.
No, because of his position, he cannot travel. He can have a stopover. He can arrange something, visiting Latin America, visiting Caribbean countries, and then have a stopover and talking to the diplomats there. But if not, then right now, I mean, his position as vice president, officially, he cannot visit the U.S., right? So U.S. has to find a way to find out how he has evolved in these years. But if President Tsai can evolve from advocating independence to maintaining the status quo, I think William Lai can do the same thing by just saying, Taiwan, Republic of China and Taiwan is already an independent country. There's no need to proclaim independence. We will continue to pursue status quo. So that would be no problem.
According to your understanding, would that be possible? The main thing for DPP right now is resist China, protect Taiwan.
Yeah.
So according to your understanding, William Lai will remain this theme for DPP from now on?
Well, I think, right now, I think the most important thing is to make sure that the U.S., doesn't see the other side as a better alternative, right? So William Lai has to maintain the status quo so that, because if he decided to have a stronger pursuit for Taiwan independence, and then the U.S. will say, are you going to be, troublemaker, or are you going to unilaterally change the status quo? So we have to, kind of respond. So in a way, I think he can maintain that position as President Tsai. But still, I think Taiwan people right now is getting used to this new type of status quo. But in mainland's view, in Beijing's view, it's totally different, right? Taiwan's status quo in Beijing's view is a pursuit of independence. Yeah, but still, who decide the status quo is Washington, D.C., it's not Beijing, right? So that's the most important thing. I think the people who felt that, at this time, if we still need the U.S., if we worry about a military attack from Beijing to Taiwan, then we will have to somehow take the bidding of the U.S.
I see.
It's interesting you mentioned his position as vice president, so he's unable to travel to the U.S. But there are also channels such as, say, through AIT or through TechPro or, say, online WebExes. Would that be something viable for president or the vice president to talk to the U.S. leaders, do you feel?
I would say that just like the President Biden, despite having 5 or 6 video conference with the President Xi Jinping of China, but continuously the United States is seeking for the face-to-face conversation with Xi. And President Biden just said repeatedly that there is no alternative. There's no better communication than a face-to-face talk. The Vice President William Lai. Of course, the professor just said that correctly, that due to the Vice President Lai's positions, even though he wanted to travel to the United States, there are still all kind of limitations that he could actually have a face-to-face conversation with a U.S. official. Unlike the President Tsai, while she was contending and running for the presidential election in year 2015, she is not the official. So she was able to meet with a U.S. official face-to-face, and then in multiple meetings, and even in some of the U.S. official buildings. So those are the very advantageous for, ironically, in Taiwan, people who is not in the official position, they can meet with higher office within the United States in comparison with the...
Very ironic.
But that's a reality right now. So I think the William Lai, despite that we try to improve whatever the kind of the modern technology can provide for us for the communication, but face-to-face conversation is still the way that the people communicate, because you could always sense a kind of the personal touch, his eyebrows, how his facial expression. Those are the things that you cannot have through the electronic media.
But you said it's a reality. There's no way they can have face-to-face exchange right now. So how can the message get crossed?
I think that will depend on how first of all, the messenger from the William Lai, and also the people who he entrusted, would that person be entrusted also by the United States?
Or the current president could actually do something. President Tsai could actually use her channels to... Do you feel that would be viable?
Well, I think President Tsai definitely would like to do the messaging if the William Lai is willing, and also the United States will accept it. But I think the issue is still, because people know the history between the President Tsai and Vice President William Lai in the past. So despite whatever President Tsai's best effort, and also the people they stand out to, the people on the other side will always have the doubt whether this is a true messenger representing the William Lai. So this is just the reality in terms of the complication on communications. It is not something that we try to ameliorate the situation, but the communication usually goes to you on both ends. How you send out a message and how the other side will receive them. So a lot of things could happen in the middle, and that's a complications.
Speaking of complications and miscommunication, Professor Yen, I wanted to go back to a bit of what Catherine was talking about, political, because President, or we hear a lot from himself in terms of when he was Tainan mayor, saying that he is a political worker for Taiwan independence.
Yes.
And I'm sure in the U.S. there might be voices that are voicing concern on this. How can he do away with that label?
Sort of walk back.
Yeah, but I think you can always walk back if you have a different position, if you are seeking for, like in the U.S., a federal office, and the state like a governor may have a different view of certain issues, but as a president in the U.S. Running for federal offices, you might take a different issue, a different position. So the same thing here. I think as a practical worker for Taiwan independence, you can talk about that's his idea, that's his ideal as well. But as vice president, as president of Taiwan, and then also you have to weigh all the factors involved in international relations. So maintaining the status quo is what the U.S. would like to see. And if Taiwan's security is still hinged on the support of the U.S., then you probably will have to change your position. But it's not that difficult, because I think both the KMT and DPP supporters, you will find out that they will vote for their party candidates, even though their candidate has moving away from the original position, but because the other candidate is even further from your preferred position, so you will continue to vote for your party candidate. Mm-hmm.
I want to talk about a special time slot. Would you consider the next Taiwan president could face one of the most difficult challenges in decades, because the third year of the next president's term is 2027. And many political researchers or analysts said and predict that that's the year that China could invade Taiwan. Would you think that is the biggest challenge that lies ahead?
I would say that a lot of things can happen between now to year 2007. And basically the year 2007, about the year to be the time that China probably will attack Taiwan, that is based on political calendar rather than the capability calendar. Capability calendar, which means that should China want to attack Taiwan, China will possess all the capability to have to launch a successful amphibious operation, in which the United States, I believe that the Pentagon's, the China military capability report just came out this last week, and claiming that they do not see the China will have the capability within 5 years, that is before year 2007, to have the capability. But year 2007, that is the political calendar for, first of all, that year will be the end of the Xi Jinping's third term. And second, that's 100 years anniversary of the PLA. So that the political calendar is always important in a communist regime, whether that's the Chinese Communist Party or the Soviet Union Communist Party. They always use those anniversary as an important political day to launch significant political actions. And so that is why the year 2007 started to come out, especially last year when both the former and the current Indo-PACOM commander in the Senate hearing, they all talk about the possibility of Chinese attack before that time. But I think that if we are able to prepare ourselves and to convince to the Chinese that the attack will be so costly, both politically and militarily, and that the year 2007 as a doomsday or the ultimatum, that probably will not happen. So that really depends on how we prepare ourselves. And one of the preparation for ourselves is that any president, whether that's William Lai for the DPP, should he successfully win and become the DPP presidential candidate or other parties, it is important that they need to maintain the trust between Taiwan and the United States. That is how the President Tsai is able to have a successful foreign relationship, especially with the United States, because right now the United States have a very strong trust about President Tsai and her team. And so that is the base for everything.
So that's going to be the key deterrence to the Chinese invasion.
Yeah, that is not only key deterrence, but also the key for Taiwan expanding its international relations with other countries, because they saw that the U.S. have a strong trust about Taiwan, and that there's the deep communication between Taiwan and the United States and cooperation. So that make it easier and also encourage other countries to engage with Taiwan more. And so that the Vice President William Lai, one of the issue, it is not whether he is advocating for Taiwan independence or the practical political workers, because when he said that, he's actually in a position as a premier. So that's more dangerous than he was the Tainan city mayor. But the issue is that will he be able to gain the same level of the trust between Taiwan and the United States, just like President Tsai. And it seems that President Tsai, many of Tsai is associated with a person rather than with an institution. So that there's still the kind of the transition, how that this kind of trust will be able to pass on from this administration to the next administration.
Well, this is a very crucial message to our audience. We just spoke about the perspective of the current Vice President William Lai in becoming the next Taiwan president, given that he's poised to win DPP's party championship. Coming up next, we'll be hearing from William Stanton, former de facto U.S. ambassador to Taiwan, in his capacity as the director of the American Institute in Taiwan, on how Taiwan-U.S. relations could develop under a potential Lai presidency.
Let's now hear from William Stanton, former de facto U.S. ambassador to Taiwan in his capacity as the director of the American Institute in Taiwan, AIT, and currently chair professor at the College of Innovation at National Chengchi University. Ambassador Stanton talks about how the U.S. and the world could perceive a Lai presidency. Let's take a look.
I don't think, the U.S., I don't think it really knows Lai Ching-te that well. And I'm not sure Lai Ching-te, though he studied in the U.S., I believe, for a master's degree, I'm not sure he's made many visits, substantive visits to the U.S. either. So I think there might, if he becomes a candidate, I think there might be a period of getting to know one another a bit. From my point of view, I regard Taiwan as practically speaking already independent. But formal statements of that have always been a no-no for fear that would be that would, so to speak, break through the facade of the current status quo. So, if he were to come out that strongly, it might actually also cost him some votes in Taiwan, because it might be regarded as too provocative, even if he's taken that position in the past.
You don't see him taking that position? You don't see that likely happening?
He wouldn't want to get off to a start where it seems like he's being provocative, particularly with regard to China, because China is so sensitive about those things. So, once you run for president, I think you have to be a lot more careful about what you say in public and what positions you adopt, whatever your previous position is stated has been, because you have many more concerns. I'm an academic now, so I can kind of say what I think. But when I was AIT director, I couldn't. I had to be much more careful to stick to what the party line was.
Do you feel national security is still on a different level in terms of what we've seen?
It was more about local issues and whether they felt the DPP was dealing with local issues. And that's why for counties and cities, there was such an overwhelming victory for the blue camp. But, in a national election, I think the issue of China would come to the fore. It would have to. And that people would have to reconsider, what it would mean. I think people ought to, they ought to realize by now that if someone like Xi Jinping is in charge of China, there's no way that you can join with China and he's not going to change the Taiwan as we know it. I mean, it would be, it'd be a totally different world for people who live here. And I think for most Taiwanese, the freedom, democracy, the ability to speak out freely, all that would disappear because he's an authoritarian leader. So I think, in a national election, the Taiwan people would have to be very aware of that. And I think that would be one of the key issues that would be brought to the fore. It's all well and good. They're going to cut off imports of foodstuffs. They're going to do this and they're that. But anyone who thinks that China could somehow be one country, two systems, I think it's naive. Just take a look at Hong Kong. Take a look at what happened in Xinjiang, what's happening in Inner Mongolia, what happens everywhere. I mean, it's the Communist Party way. or it's the highway. So you can't have it both ways.
You just heard from former AIT Director William Stanton on how the U.S. and other Democratic allies could perceive a Lai presidency in 2024 should he successfully be elected president once Tsai Ing-wen's term comes to end. Let's now discuss what a Lai presidency could mean for Taiwan's international status as the country works with like-minded democrats to deter a Chinese invasion. I want to talk about foreign policy and this topic. Can you describe what's the main difference that William Lai's stance on Taiwan's independence, different from the President Tsai Ing-wen's term? Is there going to be a huge difference and significant enough to raise risk awareness from the U.S.?
I will first talk about the differences, but I do not think that's the issue about the difference will automatically raise the stake or the risk from the United States. The difference between William Lai and President Tsai is that President Tsai seems to willing to reconcile with the Republic of China, so that you could see that in her presidency, whether that's in 2019 or after the re-election victories like last year, she continues to try to merge the Republic of China and Taiwan all together. For
she did coin a new term, Republic.
Yeah, Republic of China, Taiwan. Of course, within the green camp, a lot of people start to question that what is that? Although they know the practical usage.
She's trying to find a middle ground here. Right?
Yeah.
To keep the conversation going.
On one hand, yes, but on the other hand, that how does that mean for Taiwan internationally? Because there's no such country as Republic of China, Taiwan, and by binding Taiwan into the Republic of China more, how would that Taiwan be able to get out of the so-called one China problems? Yeah, so those are the questions surrounding that. But I think the President Tsai, by binding the Republic of China and Taiwan all together, sort of proved to the United States that she is not going to declare Taiwan independence, because Taiwan is already, not only Taiwan is already independent, but Taiwan is independent in the form of Republic of China, Taiwan. Yeah, so that is basically, you can call it that the President Tsai, her belief or her strategy. And William Lai, I think that will take a lesser position regarding how to reconcile the ROC and Taiwan together. William Lai himself already described himself as a practical Taiwan independence advocates or the workers, which means that I do not think that in his true soul, that the Republic of China will ever coexist with Taiwan. And so that becomes the probably one of the contention. That is, when William Lai came to the office, how would he deal with the Republic of China, Taiwan? Will he continue that positions, or he tried to deal away with that, but not declaring Taiwan independence? So that this is one of the things that people would like to look at. Especially when we talk about the Taiwan-U.S. or the regional development, currently the whole focus has been shifting to what Chinese shift out the position. Because in the past, it's been perceived that China's attack against Taiwan will only happen in a situation where Taiwan declares independence, or Taiwan is being perceived as moving toward declaring independence. But with Xi Jinping coming in, the position of China shifted to by redefining the Taiwan independence as Taiwan not accepting unifying under the PRC. So that the resisting the unification also can be treated as a form of Taiwan independence. And so that is how the whole focus is on how to resist Chinese coercion against Taiwan, how to preserve Taiwan's own democracy, because if the people here in a democratic system, they cannot choose their own future. What would the democracy mean for the people here? And I will say that for William Lai, his credential as the Taiwan independence workers, at least prove to the things that he is not going to yield himself or under coercion by China, that he is going to accept the Chinese term about unification. On the other hand, of course, that raised the people's eyebrow regarding will he push forward Taiwan independence. But I do not think right now that that will be his action. Because as the war talk on Taiwan just continues, the most important thing is to preserve Taiwan itself. especially to strengthen Taiwan's defense, in which President William Lai will definitely strongly supported it, and also expanding Taiwan's international space and to have a deeper connection with our like-minded friends to form a diplomatic security network in the case of the Chinese.
So you wouldn't think it could be a repeat of what we saw with Chen-shen in the
I do not think
2000s.
that is going to be the case, because I think that the whole DPP, after the 8 years of the Chen-shen, already came to the conclusion that for Taiwan to really do something, you really need to at least gain your friends their consent, not approval, but consent, that so that you are not going to do things that endanger the trust, that will endanger your own safety.
And formal de jure could come later as another step after gaining that trust, is what you mean. They could separate in different steps.
I believe so, and especially right now, the whole focus is on China, whether China will attack Taiwan and how Chinese coercion and recent Chinese economic sanction on Taiwan, that also brings up the issue that is the attack not just in terms of in the form of military, but also come in the form of economy.
Professor Yen, I wanted to go to you, since we're talking about China policy, and on the other side of the aisle with the KMT, the KMT has been strongly proposing that it has this communication lines with China, and it continues to talk about the 92 consensus. And with that, do you feel that voters in Taiwan will still be convinced about this policy, and will it maintain peace with China?
I always thought that the 92 consensus is something that you don't have to agree, but you have to acknowledge it was a mechanism of interaction before, okay? Whether it is still applicable today, that's another question. But by denying there was this mechanism, I think that's not very smart. You just say, hey, that's something in the past, maybe from 2008 to 2016, that's under the KMT, that's how they interact with the CCP, with the PRC. But now, we have a different sets of public opinion, and maybe we will try to establish a new consensus someday, right?
But in order to convince the Taiwanese public,
even for the KMT, I think it is easier for the KMT aspiring presidential candidate to acknowledge that this happened before, but we are going to pursue something maybe more suitable to Taiwan's current situation now.
would that be a new term, or do you feel new conditions?
You can talk about this saying we're going to work out a new term, a new thing, new consensus, but you don't know. You have to interact before you know, right? But at least you let those who insist there is this consensus before, feel at least it is not being denied. This happened before. But for KMT right now, I think they probably will try to convince Taiwan's voters or Taiwan's constituents that, yes, if we want to have a total, kind of separation from China economically, you got to figure out how much we're going to suffer. It has consequences. We cannot pretend that, by cutting off our relation with China, not doing business with China, when we have about 40% of our export trade, our international trade with China, you have to tell us how much we're going to suffer. Right?
But it does seem that both parties, both the DPP and the KMT, do support economic ties with China.
I think that's what Al Jazra recently said. Said both parties are for integration.
They're for economic cooperation.
But both are denying. This is how Al Jazra reporting about this is saying.
Do you agree?
Well, I agree, because I think we are kind of schizophrenic. Politically, security-wise, we depend on the U.S. But by doing business, we found sometimes, especially pre-COVID-19, people felt dealing with China is easier because you speak the same language, you travel there closer, and then you eat similar food.
But going back to the political aspect, I feel if you look at polls and if you look at what analysts say, the Taiwanese electorate does not want Taiwan to sacrifice its long, hard-fought freedoms and democracy. And to protect that, there needs to be a line drawn with China. Do you feel the KMT will come up with the new line?
Well, I think the KMT probably will say, we can protect Taiwan interests better by having a communication channel. Okay, that's the only thing they can argue. But they have to somehow also argue, not actually.
But can that line be maintained at the same time without sacrificing
I think
freedoms in
it
Taiwan?
is possible if the KMT can earn the trust of the Washington, D.C., that you are also for status quo. Also, that status quo is not what defined by Beijing, but it's what defined by the U.S. I think that will earn the trust. So the KMT, of course, need to earn the trust of the U.S. and also trying to convince the local populace that if you want to totally cut off from China, that's fine, but we will have some economic consequences. Maybe our GDP will drop, and we might not be able to get all the market we want in Southeast Asia or Japan, because it is, in reality, it is easier for a lot of Taiwan businessmen to do business across the Taiwan Strait.
Although
right?
Japan and the U.S. are allies of Taiwan.
Yeah, even though that's true, but every country, look at Southeast Asia, every country's number one trading partner is China, right? So the market is there. It's almost like, yes, you have a shopping mall right next to you. You can buy things there very cheap, but then you insist going to the handicraft place, paying more further away. But a lot of people say, yeah, I would like to have friends there, shopping at that place, but here it's so easy for me. So that's the reality. I think
it's interesting you mentioned the status quo by the U.S. President Lai, I wanted this seems to be different from what China sees. If you could talk a bit about what that is for our international viewers to understand. What is the status quo by the U.S.?
By the United States.
Yes.
Basically, they recognize the separation between Taiwan and China, but not having an official relation with Taiwan. Within some U.S. quarters, whether that Taiwan is a state or Taiwan is a non-state, I think there's still some debate within them about how to take this position. Because sometimes you look at the judicial branch, or especially from the court, the ruling actually came down to the issue that Taiwan is a state. But some other times that whether that's from the State Department officials, they try to walk away from whether Taiwan is a state or not, that position.
But in terms of Taiwan's sovereignty,
I think the agreed position is that Taiwan is not part of PRC, so that the sovereignty, PRC does not have a sovereignty over Taiwan, and especially when the PRC would like to argue that Resolution 2758 in 1997 and in the United Nations as a base for the PRC sovereignty over Taiwan, and the United States come up very strong about that interpretation is incorrect.
So in practice, the status quo is Taiwan is separate from China and keeping it that way.
Yeah. And another thing about it is that when we talk about the Taiwan-China economic relations, the DPP or the Green's position is that we are not going to deny the kind of economic exchange between Taiwan and China exists. But right now the issue is that the less coupling with China is a preferable directions. So rather than integration with China, the people basically argue that we need to have the safety measures, whether that's a China +1 or basically to reduce the kind of footprint within China. That will be the better bet for Taiwan.
I see. We just spoke about Vice President William Lai's foreign policies and how Taiwan could best deter a Chinese invasion amidst growing social unrest in PRC's under his new third term. Coming up next, we will be hearing from Lu Yeh-chung, National University Department of Diplomacy Chair and Professor, on what the top challenges the opposition parties will need to address if they are pushed out a viable presidential contender in 2024.
Let's now hear from Lu Yeh-chung, National Chengchi University Department of Diplomacy Chair and Professor. Lu spoke to me about the challenges opposition candidates will need to address and how the next president can best navigate the threat from China. Let's take a look.
I think within the KMT right now, there seems to be a generational gap. While you have very old guards supporting the unification, and the mainstream within KMT continue to be maintaining the status quo. However, for any possible candidate from the KMT, he or she needs to sort out how to deal with Beijing and Washington in the same time. If we are seeing that as a triangular relationship, how to strike a balance between Taiwan, Beijing, and Washington. That will be the main task.
Professor, if you could talk a bit about what you think would be the largest challenge in terms of U.S. Taiwan relations for the next Taiwanese president in 2025.
I think it is quite important to highlight in the past few years, actually, United States and Taiwan forged a very friendly and very meaningful partnership. So for the president in the next 4 years, it is quite important for him or her to also stress the importance of the U.S. Taiwan relations on many, many different dimensions, including economic, cultural exchanges, and more importantly, the security ties. So I think in the following few years, it is quite important to highlight this part and to demonstrate the candidate who can handle the serious challenge from the Chinese side.
You just heard from Professor Lu Yeh-chung, the chair of the Diplomacy Department at National Chengchi University, on the challenges that the next president in maintaining the trilateral Taiwan-U.S China relationship and the challenges the opposition KMT presidential candidates will have to face in contending with the next DPP candidates. Now let's talk about the specific of that. Professor Yang, I want to talk about, as a voter myself, do I have a choice to balance our political gain and economic gains when the foreign policies of President Lai is loud and clear, as President Lai just mentioned? Do I have a choice?
Well, I think, both the DPP and KMT candidate, if they both maintain status quo, then we can see, make other choices. I think right now, even the DPP understand that as long as you don't declare independence, if there is an attack 2027 or what, if it is not provoked by Taiwan, then the U.S. will probably send troops to help. But if we unilaterally declare the independence, we change the status quo by ourselves, and we will not expect any country basically sending help to our side. We became, we choose this path, then people say, you're going to be responsible for your own decision. So right now, I think we alone probably will not be able to fight against the massive military of PLA of China. So we need help. That's why we will not try to antagonize, China right now by declaring independence. Both parties, I think, the same. And then you have to look at the policy differences. Like, okay, right now we're still trying to deepen our economic development. Recently we have the TSMC, went to the US. There is some concern here, but also people said, so what? We can have a lot of high-tech company, but do we have enough electricity? Do we have enough work? So all those are the issues for the next generation's economic development that will be more viable to Taiwan's survival. Because what we have is we have a slower economic growth. Even though we are continuing to grow, I think we're doing fine. But because of the overwhelming economic growth and size of China in the past 30 years, we feel that its economy, not just in terms of the size, but also the sophistication may overtake us. So we have to keep ourselves a step ahead. I think that's our competitive edge.
Is that what you advise that the voters should look into when the next presidency elections
can we solve our, some of the issues? Like we do have to spend a lot on social welfare right now with an aging population. How do we deal with all this excessive university, all this institution of higher education that we need to shut down a lot, but it's difficult for politicians. So you have to be really straightforward, look at the problem and saying we have to make sacrifice in order to survive. You cannot just be a politician trying to make sure every sector is happy. Every sector is happy. At the end, nobody's happy.
Oh, I see. Tough and difficult choices.
Yeah. Speaking of economics and President Lai, we've seen recent bans from groupers, and a lot of it's not on semiconductors, interestingly. It's on food and agricultural products. How much will that affect the Taiwanese electorate in the next election?
I think it could be dissected into two parts. The first part is that how the people perceive about the Chinese action on Taiwan, especially after year 2020, we started to see basically none the Chinese the so-called goodwill gesture toward Taiwan. In comparison, like year 2018 and 19, there were like 31 measures or 26 measures that by the TAO, by mainland China. But after year 2020, we started to see a series of sanction lists against Taiwan. There were pineapple, there were wax apple, sugar apple, all kinds of apple, and then recently the liquors and the food import to China, they all started to get banned. And recent news also told us that some of the things that China claimed that basically as a functional issue, it becomes an issue that hidden within it is the attempt to steal some of the commercial secrets from Taiwan. So that's
the pineapple cakes with Jiatou.
Yeah, that's right. So those are the things that the people started to see that we basically did not see any goodwill from China. And then the next issue is that yes, people perceive that, but how are you able to deal with those? So that's how the government, people will perceive which government will be able to better deal with those. Dealing with those sometimes involve that if the market here is closed, then are we able to expand other market elsewhere? And are we able to help the farmers to deal with those situations by creating like an emergency fund for them to be able to transition other kind of the different breeds and plants? And also the issue about the Taiwan's commercial secret protections. How would that be addressed? Because when China is using this trying to steal, definitely they're already trying other methods trying to steal Taiwan commercial secrets. And are we able to deal with those? Are we able to protect them? So those are the things, those are just examples of things that the people is going to expect the government to find a way to deal with them.
How the government responds in that sense. And I wanted to go back to pineapples. And as you mentioned, interestingly, finding other markets. Japan came to Taiwan's response.
Can we trust our democratic allies to help us in this particular issue?
I would say because pineapple or the agricultural product is a very complicated one, because it's not just about they can buy it just like buy TV set or the semiconductors, the chips. Because the pineapple, first of all, for every country, that is a national security concern regarding environment. So that the importing about the certain fruits always will have the impact of the environment itself, not to mention about the agriculture industry in that countries. And then second thing is about it, because you're going to eat them. So that concern about the health. What kind of food that can be sanctioned as a safe for you to eat. And then it comes down to all kind of different, whether the food itself is permissible in Taiwan, probably would not be permissible in Japan. And also like Taiwan's pigs and our pork export. They have all kind of difficulty precisely because that in some part of the world, they still consider Taiwan's pork has not been really get out of some disease. We are not talking about some of the lesser known disease. That is not the issue between Taiwan and the United States and Taiwan and other countries, but it becomes the issue between Taiwan and Japan. So those are the things that get in the way